Mostly I'm just going to summarize the story because I want to take us beyond the passage of Scripture that we find there in chapter 25. We're getting close to the end of our quarter on Genesis, and I looked ahead and realized that we don't get any more of the story of Jacob and Esau beyond this short section about their birth. And I want to try to bring in a little bit more of their story because it only gets better. So like I said, this morning's lesson deals with the birth of Jacob and Esau, which are the sons of Isaac and his wife Rebekah, Isaac being the son of Abraham. And this is the third of three stories that you find in the book of Genesis that deal with warring brothers. Of course, the first is Cain and Abel, and we all know how that one ends. Then you have Isaac and Ishmael. We know how that one ends. Ishmael being sent away and Isaac being left as the true heir to what is God had promised to his father. And now we come to Esau and Jacob, these twins that are born to Isaac and Rebekah. We read in Genesis chapter 25 that very similar to what had occurred with Isaac, with Abraham and his wife Sarah, Rebekah is barren, and Isaac has to ask God that he would give him an heir. We've talked about this in weeks past. The way the culture at that time worked, men were the only ones that could own property. So for a man to die without a male heir in his household would mean poverty for his family. His wife couldn't run the way things worked. The wife couldn't own property. The wife couldn't run things. So he needed somebody to take his place as the head of the family to ensure the prosperity of his family going forward. So Isaac prays to God that they would have children. It says in here that he was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. When it is 20 more years, he's 60 years old before God grants the promise that he had made, and she has twins. And it says here in verse 23 that they struggled within her womb. In verse 22 rather, 22 it says, the children struggled together within her, and she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. Sure enough, when they're born, Esau, they named children back in those days by their characteristics, either their physical characteristics or their personalities. So when Esau was born, it said he was red and hairy. So they called him Esau, which, I guess there are people that go around with the name Harry, but it's not quite the same. That was my nickname in high school. Harry. But then Jacob comes out, the second twin, the second born comes out, holding on to Esau's heel as if he's trying to beat his brother out of the womb. And they give him the name Jacob, which is similar to the Hebrew word for heel, but it also means to supplant, to circumvent, to assail, to overreach. So this competition that God foretold has already started. But it's only started. It's only just begun. In the same chapter, we read how after they've grown, it says Esau was somebody who went out and hunted in the fields, but Jacob was a plain man who stayed in the tents. What scholars think that means is Jacob was somebody that stayed close to the house, stayed and took care of his father's flocks. So we read this story later in that same chapter about how Esau has been out hunting all day long, and he is hungry to the point of death. And he comes upon his brother Jacob, who is evidently out in the field tending the flocks. He's got his tent set up, and Esau, being so hungry, asks his brother for some pottage, some soup, and he says, well, sure, I'll give you some soup if you give me your birthright. And Esau, being so hungry, says, well, what good's a birthright going to do me if I die from hunger? Sure, take it. So the way that worked in those days, ever how many sons a man had, they would divide his estate into that many sections plus one. So if you had 2 sons in here, they would divide it into 3 parts. If you had 12 sons, they'd divide it into 12 parts plus 1, 3 or 13. And then that eldest son, the one who held the birthright, would get the extra share. So it's not that Jacob is taking all that Esau ever had coming to him, but he's taking that extra share that he had coming to him as the eldest son. And then later, just a couple of chapters later, Jacob does some sneaky dealing again. For those of you that have read this before, you know that there was something else that he wanted from his father. Not just a birthright, but a blessing. Isaac was getting on up in years, and it was Esau's privilege to be blessed by his father, for his father to pray over him and declare God's goodness on him. Well, Jacob wanted that too. Jacob and his mommy wanted that too. So he dresses up in his father's, in Esau's clothing. He kills a goat and passes it off as venison because Esau was a good hunter. He put fur on his arms so he could fool his nearly blind dad into thinking he was his hairy brother. Sneaks into the tent and gets that blessing from Esau too. And more than, I think this is interesting, more than stealing the birthright, more than stealing the physical possessions, the thing that makes Esau so mad is that Jacob, his brother, stole his blessing. He stole the goodness of God that his father Isaac was going to put on him. And it says he hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father had blessed him. And he said, the days of mourning for my father are at hand, meaning, old dad's going to die pretty soon. Then will I slay my brother Jacob. And it gets back to Jacob. Rebekah finds out what's going on. She says, son, you better get out of here. Yep. So she sends him off to the household of his uncle Laban. I know some of this is old hat to a lot of us who've read this story many, many times. But let's pay attention, and I think there's something here for us to learn. So Jacob gets to his uncle Laban's house, and what happens? Falls in love with a girl named Rachel, Laban's second oldest daughter. He agrees with his father-in-law that he'll work for 7 years, and in exchange for that 7 years of work, he'll get to marry the one he loves. But surprise, on the wedding night, lifts up the veil, and it ain't Rachel in the tent. It's her older sister Leah. And I love this. He's mad, and he goes to his father-in-law Laban and says, what did you do? He said, well, it wouldn't be right for me to give to my youngest daughter what belongs to my oldest daughter. The trickster has been tricked. It was exactly what he had coming to him. He said, but I'll tell you what, if you work 7 more years, you can have the one you wanted. So he does it, and I think it's so beautiful. It says he worked 7 years, but he loved Rachel so much it was as but a day. That's one of the most beautiful sentences I've ever read. But, through all these 14 years that he spends in Laban's house, God blesses, even though he's a cheat and even though he's a liar, and God blesses Jacob, just as Isaac had prayed for him. His family grows, and he has all these children, and his flocks grow, and he's got all this wealth. I mean, that's how wealth was measured in those days, by how many animals. God blesses him hand over hand, and it gets to be so much that Laban's own sons start getting jealous, and it's not a good environment anymore. So God tells Jacob to go back to his father's land, the land of Canaan. But that's easier said than done, because who's waiting in Canaan? Esau. Big old hairy man. Mad, ready to kill his brother.
Been mad for years.
And as they head that way, Jacob sends messengers to let Esau know that he's coming. And those messengers come back and they say, your brother's on his way. And this rightfully so scares Jacob. So him being the kind of cowardly little trickster he is, he divides his people into two halves, thinking that, well, he might kill this bunch, but he won't kill the rest of them. He sends goats and sheep and camels and all kinds of other animals ahead of him. Because usually if you were giving somebody a gift, you would bring it with you. But no, he's sending it ahead of him, hoping that if he gives his brother enough animals, maybe he'll stop hating him so much. And he says, Jacob, here's all this stuff. Jacob's behind us. And he sends another wave and he says, here's all this stuff. It's for you. Jacob's behind us. And he keeps going and keeps going. He sends his entire family. Jacob is just such a little wimp. He sends his entire family into Canaan ahead of him, even though he says he's worried that Esau is going to kill even the mothers and the children. He's like, all right, kids, I'll wait here. You go on. I'll be right behind you. And he finds himself alone. We've all heard this story. He finds himself alone on one side of the brook, and everybody else is on the other side. And during the night, doesn't say how it happens, but a man comes upon him. And they start wrestling, and they wrestle all night until the sun is about to come up. Jacob, he's holding on for dear life, and the man, the only way he can get away from him is he touches him on the leg, and it dislocates him. But Jacob says, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And this man does, and he changes Jacob's name to Israel, which means, for as a prince thou hast power with God and with men, and hath prevailed. Now, you'll notice that this man Jacob says, well, who are you? And he doesn't tell him. But Jacob calls the name of that place Peniel, which means I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. So finally, the next day, now he's walking with a limp that he'll have for the rest of his life because of that injury during the wrestling match. The next day, Jacob crosses the brook to meet Esau, and he sees him coming with a band of 400 men. So he divides the party in half. Like we said, he puts his handmaids, his female slaves that he'd had children with first, he puts them out front. And next comes Leah, the sister he didn't want. And then back in the back is him and Rachel. Presumably that if things go south, they're going to be able to get away. So as they come on, Esau doesn't attack him. Esau doesn't do what Jacob expected. He keeps coming and he keeps coming. And when he's within eyesight, Jacob bows 7 times to the earth.
Oh, listen.
Esau runs to him and kisses him. And it says they both weep. And I can imagine, clearly Esau is happy to see his brother, and that he's probably weeping because he had missed him, but Jacob is probably weeping because, oh gosh, here it goes. I can feel the knife in there, oh gosh. And then, to realize then that that's not what was going to happen. Listen. To realize that he was not going to be met with destruction, but with love. Listen what he says. Esau refuses all those gifts that Jacob had sent him. He says, I have enough. I don't need this stuff. But Jacob says, I've been blessed. God has blessed me. He says, if now I have found grace in thy sight, then receive my present at my hand. For therefore I have seen thy face, as though I have seen the face of God. And thou art pleased with me. He says, I've seen your face, Esau, and it's like I'm seeing the face of God. And Esau takes the blessing. He takes a blessing from the one that stole the blessing that he had coming to him. And I've told you all that story to bring us to this moment. It's an overlooked detail in this long story of Jacob and Esau. But at the very end, when they get there and they reunite and they have this tearful reunion, Esau says, let us take our journey. Come on. Let's go together. We've been separated all this time. Now we're back together. Go with me. Travel with me. And Jacob makes up this lame excuse. He says, let my Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servant, and I will lead on softly, according as the cattle that goeth before me, and the children be able to endure, until I come unto my Lord unto Seir. And Esau said, let me now leave with thee some of the folk that are with me. And he said, what needeth it? Let me find grace in the sight of my Lord. And Esau returned that day and went unto Seir. Jacob is saying, well, my cows are tired and my kids are tired, but you go on, Esau. And Esau says, well, I'll just leave some people here and help you on the way. He said, no. You go on, and I'll catch up with you in Seir. It says, Jacob journeyed to Succoth, and built him a house, and made booths for his cattle. Therefore, the name of that place is called Succoth. Went the opposite direction. Sends his brother on, and by the time he's out of sight, he's like, all right, we're going this way. After all those years, after all that time, after the love that Esau had shown unto him, tells him one last lie. One final heartbreak. And as far as we can tell, they don't see each other again until Isaac dies and they have to come together to bury him. And I wondered, why wouldn't Jacob journey with Esau? Why wouldn't you want to be with your brother that you have been separated from for so long? Why wouldn't you want to live in close proximity to your family? Was maybe Jacob was ashamed of the way he had treated his brother in the past, and maybe he couldn't get over it. Maybe he was worried that, he was a trickster. He was a liar. If you've ever noticed, people that can't tell the truth tend to think that everybody else lies too. Somebody that's dishonest tends to think that everyone else is dishonest too. So maybe he didn't think Esau's forgiveness was genuine. Maybe he thought that once he gets me to Seir, once he gets me away, he'll stick it to me then. We don't know, and it doesn't really matter, but because this much we do know. Jacob saw forgiveness in Esau's face. He described it like he had seen the face of God, which Jacob would know a thing about because he had just spent all night wrestling with God. He said, I've seen God face to face. He sees that forgiveness. He tells Esau, sing your faces like sing the face of God. And yet, the mercy that his brother offered to him, the love, the relationship that his brother offered to him, he turns and goes the other way. And this is what I thought of as I was reading that story. Every single one of us, me and you and every man, woman, boy, and girl on the face of the planet, have wronged God and we've wronged other people. And we know, if we're honest with ourselves, that we are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And for so many of us, we carry the guilt of our wrong. I know I'm guilty of this. We carry it around inside of us. And even though things look good on the outside, even though we're doing good in our careers, even though we've got a nice house and a nice family and everything that we think we need to have a good life, even though things look real good on the outside, you can look at Jacob. Even though God had blessed him beyond measure, there was still something unsettled down deep in his heart. He still knew that he had done his brother wrong and that there was something in his life that was not where it ought to be. How many of us do the exact same thing? The outside looks good, everything looks right, but deep down we still carry the guilt of our past wrongs inside of us. And at some point, just like Jacob, we find ourselves looking into the face of God. For Jacob, he wrestled with an angel. And then he saw the face of God in Esau. For us, we experience the face of God as we hear the words of Jesus. When we hear about the works of Jesus. When we hear about his story and hear about how he came and how he lived and the love that he offers to each and every one of us. That's how we see God. And how Christians shine that light before us. We're met with the face of God just like Jacob. And whereas we expect, and I can only speak for myself, but when I came face to face with God, I expected to find judgment and hatred and destruction.
Come on, buddy.
Just like Jacob. But instead, I found love and I found forgiveness. I found somebody that wasn't going to stick a knife in my back. I found somebody that would grab me around the neck and weep on me and love on me. And yet, so many of us, even after looking God face to face and understanding what kind of love He wants to give us, say, thanks, but no thanks. I think I'll go another way. Forgiveness offered to us, a relationship offered to us. But God says, come with me. I'm going someplace and I want you to be there too. So many of us say, I got my own thing I got to do. Can you imagine what Esau felt like when he realized, when he got to see her? Maybe he waited days, weeks. Where's Jacob? Maybe he sent servants, we don't know, the Bible doesn't say. Maybe he sent servants back to look for him. Maybe something happened to him. No, they went to Succoth. He clearly wanted a relationship with his brother. His heart must have been broken when he realized one more lie, one more deception. His long-lost brother would stay estranged from him for almost the rest of their lives. I don't know how Esau felt. Maybe he wasn't surprised at all. Maybe he just, it's one of those deals. That's my brother. But I do know that however Esau felt, it does not compare with the heartbreak that God feels when somebody walks away from a relationship with Him. Each and every one of us have been met by mercy. Instead of wrath and judgment, when we see God, it's unmerited love, unmerited forgiveness, despite all we've done. All God wants in return is for us to go with Him. So I implore you this morning, if you're looking at God, if you see the face of God, if you see the love that He has for you, if you see the forgiveness and the mercy that He is offering, and He says, come with me. Don't turn and go another way.
Bless you.